Welcome to the latest episode of Five on the Floor on the Five Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for joining us on your favorite podcast app on Apple Podcasts, on Android, we recommend Spotify, and the Five Reasons YouTube channel. Make sure you check out all the content about the Dolphins, the Canes, Inter Miami, the Panthers, the Marlins. Yes, 3 yards per carry is now live. Well, not live yet. I'll get them there. They're on video. You can actually see the very popular Miami Dolphins podcast, kind of our counterpart here at the Five Reasons Sports Network. You can catch them there on the YouTube channel. Also, check out Off the Floor. That's our Discord server. It's $2.99 per month. Bypass the Apple upcharge. You get access to 11 different channels now, including our Eurobasket channel as we continue to follow that. We're going to have Brian Fonseca on this week again. People like him on this stuff. He knows everything. So I'll bring Brian on to talk about what goes on in the knockout round. Of course, all 3 Heat players are participating over there have made it out of the group stage. Fontecchio, Larson, and Jovic. So we'll be following that. Also, check out PrizePicks. Use the code 5, F-I-V-E. Put down your 5. You get 50 to play right away. PrizePicks is the official fantasy sponsor of the Five Reasons Sports Network. Football season has started. Follow our plays. We had a really good first day. The weather didn't cooperate, but our choices did. Use the code 5, F-I-V-E. Put down your 5. Get your 50. The NFL is playing pretty much every day. Have a good shot at it. I don't know what I was going to say there. Now today's episode.
Uh-oh. Yeah. It's Mercy. Music by Mercy again. Heat Nation, we the culture. Yo, E, I need you to call timeout. Need ready to set the floor plan. Tropical blanket, open for the shot. Yo, Greg, set the pick. Still 5 on the floor, still ride for my dog. Still battle on the court, still survive in the war. Keep your eye on the ball, or get burned from the keep this mic off the wall without turning the cheek. From night to day, no sleeping paths or allowed to mornings. The nut is sleeping us, never catch us snoring. Live from Miami, report in the heat with 5 Reasons Sports from the courts to the streets. Dang, Wake County, Heat Nation, we say it proudly.
Welcome to 5 on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, Alex Toledo, Brady Hawk, and others from the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Also, make sure to subscribe to Off the Floor for the most heat anywhere.
Welcome back to 5 on the Floor. Here's today's floor plan. I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me at Ethan J. Skolnick on 5 Reasons Sports. I got Greg Sylvander. You can follow me at Greg Sylvander. One bit of news here I just wanted to mention. I am going to be managing the Miami Heat and Orlando Magic sites for On SI, basically Sports Illustrated. And that means you're going to see a lot more of our content. Nothing is changing at 5 on the Floor or at the 5 Reasons Sports Network, but I'm populating those sites with our people. So Alex has already been writing over there, and yes, Brady will be writing there. So I know a lot of you have missed Brady's writing over the past year plus, but Brady, Austin Dobbins, Mateo Mayorga, and others from our network will be writing for those sites, and you'll be seeing our podcast there. You'll be seeing everything. You're not going to be able to escape us. Basically, that's it. It's just the Heat content all day long. Hangnail, we'll be doing 12 stories on it. That's what we're going to do. I'm not letting Brady out of the basement. That's how this is playing. So, Greg, anyway, you're allowed to write at some point too, as well. I know that's something you've done in the past. If you
This
want
is
to,
true. Yeah.
just
Who knows?
join-
Maybe a weekly guts check will come back.
That's fine. I mean, I just that's it. Just hit publish. That's it. That's all. That's all we got to do. It's just a content world at this point. Anyway, it is a Hall of Fame weekend in the NBA, and the Heat are represented there, and we're going to talk about that. Micky Arison, the owner, longtime managing partner, and owner of the Miami Heat. Of course, he's not. Doesn't have final say anymore. His son does. Nick Arison does. I know a lot of Heat fans don't realize that Mickey's office is actually in Doral, and where Carnival is based, whereas Nick works out of Miami most of the time. Nick, that's been the case again since 2011. But again, a lot of people don't know that. Of course, Mickey's still heavily involved in the organization and was obviously heavily involved in the recruitment of Pat Riley, which we talked about the other day. 30-year anniversary of that, of Pat taking over at that time. Let's get to the rest of the class first, and then let's kind of pivot back into Mickey, because the headliner on this class is Carmelo Anthony. Dwight Howard as well. There are others. Sue Bird is in there. Who else am I missing? Danny Crawford, the longtime official, right?
Maya Moore, who like most
Maya Moore.
of the WNBA greats credit her a ton as like their favorite player growing up. I've heard multiple players say that. So shout out to her. Sylvia Fowles.
Fouts. Yeah.
Oh, excuse me. Yeah. And who am I missing here? Danny Crawford. Did you mention him?
Yes. Yeah, Danny Crawford, longtime official, not to be confused with Joey Crawford, who I just actually saw in Vegas. By the way, Joey Crawford is one of the nicest men you'll ever meet. I know people don't think so because he would eject everybody, but he really is like one of the most pleasant people I've ever met in the NBA. He kept apologizing because he was sitting in front of Ira and I at the baseline as we were in the little gym in Vegas watching Pelle Larson. And he's like, is my bald head getting in the way, the shine on my bald head? So big Joey Crawford fan. But Danny Crawford, you probably remember as well. Danny Crawford officiated a lot of the Heat's Big Three championship games. If you look there, you'll see a lot of Danny Crawford, and I think the Heat generally felt him to be a fair official. So Danny Crawford goes in as well. But let's talk about the two headliners here from the player standpoint, and then again we'll pivot back to the Arisons. First, let's start with Melo. Now, Melo said something recently that got some attention. He's on the podcast circuit. Of course, he's part of the Banana Boat crew with Dwayne and Chris Paul and LeBron. He was drafted number 2 overall in the LeBron draft. Oh, excuse me, was not drafted number 2 overall. He was drafted number 3 overall. He should have been drafted number 2 overall. You know the story behind that, by the way. I think Rip Hamilton told me that story because he was part of the Pistons at that time. That it basically they didn't want it. They didn't think. I think it was a Larry Brown, Joe Dumars not being on the same page issue there,
Wow.
and wanting Darko, and of course Milicic was like going to be the next huge thing. Laziest bleeper ever, from what I heard, and they were concerned about whether Melo would accept kind of a smaller role on that Detroit team because they had Tayshaun Prince as their starting 3. And of course, they did win a championship with that group. So it's not like they didn't have success. They made it to a couple of finals, won a championship, but they would have been much better for longer, obviously, if they drafted Carmelo. But that, again, was a big point of contention. But later on, after Carmelo had success with the Nuggets, what did he say recently about how he could have joined the Heat?
Yeah, he essentially alluded to the 2010 offseason. And I think where he was going with it was, had he not extended the year prior, he could have entered free agency at the same time as all those guys. And I bet that when they all were playing with Team USA, there were conversations about how everyone could come together and what it would take to do that. So that was kind of he was implying that he could have been there may have been a big 4 in Miami, but he didn't necessarily want to be the 4th option. I don't think he would have been the 4th option offensively, but it would have been crowded initially. I think there was probably a couple times that Melo could have joined the Heat. But yeah, I think that he's the headline of this class because truthfully for me, I think he was a much better player than Dwight Howard, who's the other headliner, but for me had a much smaller window at his peak.
You and I disagree about that.
Really?
Actually. Well, let me get to the Melo part. Okay. He is the headliner. I think he's the biggest name. As far as joining the Heat, I don't know how that would have worked financially. I have no idea. I mean, what ended up happening with Melo, of course, was then he forced his way out of Denver and he forced his way to the Knicks, but he didn't want to wait. And if he had waited, he could have signed on with the Knicks without them having to give up Wilson Chandler, Gallinari, Mozgov, picks. Like they gutted the roster to bring him in other than Amare. And then they never got past the Big 3 Heat because they didn't have enough with them. So I don't know how that, and I don't know how the money would have worked with the Heat. I mean, remember, guys had to take pay cuts to begin with. Dwayne took a pay cut. Now that was to get UD back, but UD took a pay cut. And
they would have had to take huge pay cuts. It sounds completely unreasonable.
Right. And I don't know how it would have worked on the court. Like you said, like, okay, so yes, Carmelo Anthony's and it was an elite talent, no question. But so what would it have been? You wouldn't have started. I mean, they weren't starting Bosch at center to begin with, but I guess you would have had. I mean, Spo would have been forced to do that right away, right? Like you would have gone Bosch, LeBron, and Carmelo up front with Wade and Rio, right? I mean, these are all be some Rio.
Or they would have leaned big and had Dwayne and LeBron basically handle the ball, and with Melo, Bosch, and Joel Anthony or something like that. Or Jermaine
You
O'Neal,
can't.
if he wasn't afraid of the body fat percentage,
Yeah.
like he said.
Oh well, we saw that one too. He didn't want to do that either. But Chalmers, you can't take Chalmers out of the starting lineup. Nothing would have worked. I'll always hold to that. It's an interesting thought. Now, quickly on Carmelo versus Dwight. Okay, I actually think Dwight contributed more to winning at his peak.
That's fair. He
The
got
peak
to a
was
finals.
shorter.
Yeah.
As the best player. I don't know that Carmelo ever. See, I always had kind of a thing with. There's no question Carmelo's an elite scorer, and I respect a lot of what he's done off the court. Okay, I do. But if you put Carmelo's numbers, I used to do this. You take Carmelo's numbers next to another guy who played for the Nuggets for a long time, who was an elite scoring forward, Alex English. Literally, put their numbers together for like a 10-year period of their prime. They were the same player. The same player. 2 points per game. Alex English never won anything either. Okay. I don't know, but they were the same player. He was basically Alex English who got to New York, who played at Syracuse and then got to New York. Alex English was stuck out in Denver the entire time. And so nobody really thinks of Alex English as one of the greatest scorers of all time. But look at
And he's a
for
little
those who are going to
taller than
laugh at me
Alex
here.
English, too.
Well, Alex English, I think, was 6'7", wasn't he? I believe. I think. We'll check it. I'm telling you, for those who doubt me on this, go to Basketball Reference and do the statistical comparison. You could take out like their last 3 years because I know that's not really fair because guys decline at different rates. But just go from the beginning of their careers until like 3 years out. Their stats
6'8".
are yes. Oh no, he was a legit.
Yeah.
He was a legit small forward. No question. He's one of the forgotten players in the NBA. I'm not saying Carmelo Anthony was not great. I'm saying that the fact that he won a championship with Syracuse as a freshman in a New York market, so to speak, right? Obviously, he had New York roots. He also had Baltimore roots, but he had roots from a couple different places. And he was part of that crew with Bron. I remember watching Bron's first game that was nationally televised was against Denver. They put Carmelo and LeBron against each other. I remember neither of them played particularly well, but that was the first game that I remember watching too. It was the two of them together. I think I was in New Orleans with the Heat at that time. Actually, I think I was. It was like, and so I'm just saying, I'm not great player, but I don't know that he ever would have won anything as the best player. Like those Knicks teams. I mean, a lot of guys got hurt. Amare was great until Carmelo came, and then like he started to fall apart physically. But I don't know. He never really put winning first, and so for me, there's a little bit of a. Whereas Dwight, I think Dwight just wanted to win. You could build an entire defense around Dwight differently, but like you can around Bam. He was never the scorer he wanted to be. But the other funny thing about Dwight, Greg, and then on the other side we'll get to Mickey. The other thing about Dwight that just cracks me up is that Shaq. He can be so phony sometimes. Like Shaq trashed him his entire career, right?
He did.
Total jealousy, right? Because he didn't want anybody following him in Orlando, even though Shaq's a better player, right? But Shaq very insecure about that kind of stuff, always, right? And then now all of a sudden he loves Dwight. He says I was just trying to get more out of him. I was just trying to get more out of him. I love him like a brother. Like what the F? Why was he trying to get more out of him? Like did he play for his team? Would he no, it's just Shaq.
He also
stealing
said when Pat told
here.
him to get in shape that he said and be more like Alonzo, that he said I averaged 34, 12, and 8 against Alonzo, so I don't need to get, and look like because obviously Riles wanted Shaq to be in Zoe-like shape. Yeah.
Yeah. And ain't nobody was getting in Zoe-like shape. Well, the other thing is he also told that story on a podcast recently about how he wedded Pat. He got kicked out. He got traded the next day by Pat, which isn't also accurate, but it doesn't really matter. The point is Dwight's going in, Carmelo's going in. They're both Hall of Famers. I don't think there's any question about that. Dwight could have been the year that everybody was frustrated that Rose won MVP, which was 2011. I admit it. I voted for Rose. I'm sorry. Okay. One of the two votes that LeBron was angry at me about. All right. That was, I voted for Rose because I was trying so hard to be impartial.
I didn't know that.
That
changes so much. No.
It really does. It really does. Well, I mean, it was before the playoffs when they took him completely out and this and that. But they led the team. Look, the reality is, okay, the Heat kind of disappointed their first year. They were 9-8 to start the season. They had the long winning streak. No, they won 21 out of 22 against bad teams. They got it right. They ended up finishing second in the East. But Rose led a team. He was the clear leader of the team. His efficiency numbers were not great, but he was playing a different way. And so I leaned him. But when you actually look at the metrics from that year, 2010, 2011, the MVP should have been Dwight Howard. He was actually based on the analytics. Dwight Howard was the best player that season. I know it's hard to argue back and forth now, but I'm just saying that was the case. It really wasn't Rose. It really wasn't LeBron that it was stolen from. It was Dwight that it was stolen from. If you just look at the stats. Anyway, on the other side, we'll get to the Arisons here, but I do think both players, they're Hall of Famers, and it's unfortunate that Dwight's later career, he never really got close to the level that he was at during that brief period of time, and some of it was kind of colored by the whole, before with the whole, remember him mocking Stan and all that sort of stuff. There's a lot of stuff going on there.
That's where
So
it started getting weird from that point on. He
from
had
that
some
point,
good years
yeah.
statistically, don't get me wrong. Are you surprised Billy Donovan is getting in?
Well, yes and no, and that's why it's such a weird Hall of Fame. Because in the NBA, like, Billy Donovan is the furthest thing from a Hall of Famer. Like, I mean, legitimately, like, I don't even know why he's still there in Chicago. He's a good coach, but they haven't done a damn thing. They're I hate to say it, the Heat are now too, but like, they've just been a play-in team that hasn't had the finals run, right? So I don't. But as far as University of Florida, I mean, yeah, I mean,
That was a good run.
he built an elite program. He sent a bunch of guys to the pros. There was never any real controversy with Billy as far as cheating or anything like that. You didn't hear that kind of stuff with him. Also, not that this matters, but he was a pretty damn good player in college too. Providence, he had that one run. I mean, so there's a lot of, and he's a genuinely nice guy. Like, I feel like people like Billy Donovan, and that helps here. But that's why the Hall of Fame is so weird, because you have some guys that are like, okay, this is an automatic Hall of Famer. And then you have others that you're like, all right, well, what are we taking this from? We taking this from international player? We taking this from collegiate? What are we taking this from? You know what I mean? Like, where is this coming from? And that's where it gets weird. All right, but we are finally going to get to the Heat part of this on the other side. Before we do, it's the weekend. It's the weekend. And so this is going to be necessary, particularly here in South Florida. It's called Ziotics. Ziotics. I got to tell you about this game-changing product I use before a night out or a weekend out with drinks. It's called pre-alcohol. If you're going to be out on the boat, make sure that you're doing this, okay? Just make sure that you're doing this. And then if you're not doing this, don't go downstairs, okay, into the cabin, okay, because it's going to be the worst feeling of your life. But just do this and then just stay up top, okay, if the weather is good this weekend. Ziotics pre-alcohol probiotic drink is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's a buildup of this byproduct, not dehydration. That's to blame for rough days after drinking. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make pre-alcohol your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best tomorrow. Fall is right around the corner, so that means it's time to raise a glass to your favorite team, whether it's the Heat, the Dolphins, or any other. Whether you're tailgating, enjoying a college game day, or watching Sunday's action on that fancy new TV, don't forget Ziotics pre-alcohol probiotic drink. Drink a pre-alcohol before drinking and enjoy great days after celebrating all season long. Go to ziotics.com/on-the-floor to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use on the floor at checkout. Ziotics is backed with a 100% money back guarantee. So if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money. No questions asked. Remember to head to ziotics.com/on-the-floor and use the code on the floor at checkout for 15% off. Okay, so the Heat representative this time around is Micky Arison, and we're in an interesting place here. Okay, and so I'll start, and then I'll let you go to some of the numbers. All right, I cover all the teams down here. I have since 1995, 96. Okay, so around the time that the Arisons took full control of the franchise. If you are looking at the totality of work for the franchises in South Florida, this is the biggest no-brainer Hall of Fame induction of any of them. Okay. And I just say this to people who are fans of the other teams in town and the absolute chaos that has gone on with those ownership groups over time. Okay, let's just little bit of a history lesson here, okay? For those who are not as old as me. All right. The Dolphins they basically had three ownership groups. They had the Robbies, okay, who hired Shula, obviously had a lot of success for a long time, but didn't have a lot of money. Okay. And that was an issue. They didn't have the money to compete with as they went forward. Wayne Huizenga bought the Dolphins or got control of the Dolphins. Also brought two other franchises to South Florida, the late Wayne Huizenga, the Panthers and the Marlins. So whatever anybody says about Wayne, and I had some issues with politics and other things along those lines, but whatever anybody says about Wayne, two of the teams in this market would likely not exist if not for Wayne. Okay. And the Dolphins, he tried. Okay. He did try. Okay. There's no question about it. Like he brought it, he listened to the fans. Okay. And he went and got Jimmy. That's who everybody wanted. Jimmy Johnson at that time. Everybody was done with Shula. He went and got Jimmy. Now, we can talk about the whole Wannstedt thing and the way that was transferred over and the fact that Jimmy didn't care anymore and just wanted to play with his Yorkie Buttercup and trade stocks. But whatever it is, okay, Jimmy did give us Jason Taylor and Zach Thomas, okay, although not a lot of success beyond that. Wannstedt didn't work out. When Wannstedt didn't work out, he went out and got, eventually, a few years later, he went out and got Nick Saban, who everybody wanted Nick Saban. Okay, I didn't because the guy was a bleep hole, but
feels so
everybody
gross today.
Right, it does, right? He MF'd me in a bar at his radio show. But okay, at Gatsby's and Davy, which no longer exists. But that's another story altogether. Okay, the fact is, he went out, he got those guys. It didn't work out. Okay, it just never worked out. The Dolphins could not get out of their own way. He would fire one part of he'd fire like a coach, but not the GM, and then keep the GM, and then the coach. This okay. Then Steve Ross takes over. All this money. New York money, although also Palm Beach, right? Related group, all this kind of stuff. He has spent. No one's going to argue with that. Ross has spent. He's also built this complex in Miami Gardens, of all places, with where he's got the premier tennis and premier, and grand, the F1 and all the rest of that. The team hasn't done jack, okay, at all. Like, I got off that beat because I couldn't tolerate it anymore. And literally, I was at the last playoff game that they won, which was December 30th, 2000. Lamar Smith ran for 209 yards. Every team has won a playoff game since. Every team in the NFL, including some that did not exist at that time. Okay. Every one of them has won a playoff game. You're a Dolphin fan. You can relate to this. Okay. Every single one of them. So between Huizenga and Ross, since that time, they've not won anything. They're probably going to fire another coach this year, even though I like the coach. The general manager, nobody seems to think is the right guy anymore, but he's kept him on forever. Doesn't matter how much money he throws at it, it doesn't work. And he even has thrown shade, not just money. He's thrown shade at the Heat for years, okay, including that comment after LeBron left that now we're going to capture the imagination at this time. I'm still effing waiting, okay, for that to actually happen. Go ahead, Greg, and then I'll continue this. Go ahead.
It's a perfect segue into the fact that I was a Heat fan, and I continue to show my age. I was a Heat fan before Riley and before Mickey took over as the managing director. So it was Louis Chaffel and Billy Cunningham, and I had forgotten actually that there was financial backing by Ted Arison. So shout out to him, because ultimately I think that's the common thread that got Mickey involved, etc. So, but I remember what it was like to be a Heat fan before this ownership group that's in place now was here. And listen, like, they were kind of like this little team that could in a mid-market that was trying to catch on. And the most exciting stuff that had ever happened before Mickey took over the team was basically a great all-star weekend where they had a slam dunk champion and a 3-point champion, and a playoff series against the Hawks where they won a couple games. They got swept out by the Bulls, and that was that. Glenn Rice scored 56 on a Sunday against Orlando. That was a really special moment. But other than that, there was not much winning. So I just think when you put in perspective, and we've done a lot of perspective episodes recently, but in this particular case, when you think about what's gone on after that, and we'll talk more about what all that means, I just think that for those of you that remember what it was like before, you know that it's been a damn good ride since Mickey took over and brought Pat down.
I definitely think this is a generational thing. You see the comments on Twitter; they are different from where you see them on Facebook or when you talk to the average fan. I do think it's the same thing we talked about with Riley. It really is. That's where it is. It's all expecting it to be at that level all the time. But beyond just the Dolphins example, okay, the Marlins have won 2 World Series since they came in. One with Wayne as the owner, and one with, I guess, John Henry was the owner. Okay, 2003, right? Okay, both times they blew the team up. All right. They then oh no, Laurier was the owner in 2003. I'm sorry. Okay, Laurier was Sampson. My bad. John Henry was in between. Okay, so
Mhm.
Laurier. Okay, who again? We know what that was. They kind of lucked into that one. I know David. I know David a long time. Okay, David will argue with me about this, but like Laurier, I don't think he cared about winning, but not that much. Okay, they caught lightning in a bottle in 2003 with the call ups of Dontrell and of Miggy, and so that was a whole different. They put a really good team together. The GM that year, Mindfest, ended up getting fired. They put a really good team. They haven't done anything in 20 years since. Okay, Loria obviously got the city. He got a sweetheart deal for a stadium, which they've never been able to fill. They have an owner now who doesn't have the means to spend it all. He used Sherman. He used Jeter as like this front on the whole thing. Jeter got a sweetheart deal. Okay, everything there just feels off. Okay, I know that they've built some young talent. This GM Bendix seems like he might have a clue, hopefully, but like it's nothing. And then the Panthers. The other example being the Panthers. The recent ownership group has worked. Vinny Viola has worked. No question about that. Okay, I mean, look at it. I mean, they're the only franchise in sports right now that's won 2 straight titles. The only one. Okay, they are the model franchise in sports at the time being, because he made one great hire and let him work. And if you're going to credit that's Bill Zito. And if you're going to credit the Panthers for doing that, then you have to credit Micky Arison for doing that. He
Mhm.
made one great hire and he let
Got
him
out of the
work.
way.
Right, like right out of the box. Okay, and when you make that hire, everything that comes after, you get some of the credit for. That's how business works. So if
Inherently.
you make the hire of Pat Riley and he makes it to 24 playoffs in 30 years and 7 finals and 3 championships, and I understand they're not where they need to be right now, but he also hires, as I've talked about, he promotes Eric Spoelstra to head coach out of the film room. He promotes Andy Ellisberg, okay, continues promoting him to where his position is. He grooms Adam Simon, okay, and others that we talk about, okay, whether it's or the work he does with Chet Kammerer or any of the other in the organization. And
Mhm.
then those that grow from Spo, okay, whether it's Quinny ends up being a head coach or any of these others, like it all goes back to that one decision. And do you know how difficult it is? Okay, as someone who I've been learning how to manage people over the last 5 years, to work with someone for 30 years and not have it blow up. Jerry Jones couldn't work with Jimmy Johnson otherwise because Jerry wanted to take the credit. Remember, you may be old enough to remember this. When the Cowboys had won 2 Super Bowls and Jerry was at
Yeah.
like an
That's when
owners
I
meeting
started watching football.
okay, and he took the credit for it, which pissed off Jimmy, and Jimmy left. And so they brought in Switzer, who won one more Super Bowl with Jimmy's players, and the Cowboys haven't won a effing thing since. There is something to just being an owner, and I think San Antonio did this too with Pop, Peter, the Holtz, and all the rest. Like they put Pop in charge. Pop brought in Buford. They kept continuity, and to a certain degree, the Laker family has done this. Okay, with the late Jerry Buss, and then Jeannie, and we know that not everybody loves Jim Buss and all the rest of. There's a lot of stories, and now of course they got sold, and they're going to spend a lot more money, but they're going to be run differently. But there is something to be said, Greg, for just being a guy that Pat Riley still respects, and
Yep.
that relationship that they've built, which Pat has spoken to, and I know Anthony Chang spoke to him recently about it, has really catalyzed the Heat to be the premier franchise in town over a very lengthy period, this recent Panthers blip notwithstanding, way ahead of a team that had history, tradition, was the only team in town for a quarter century. Okay, had Shula, had Marino, had all of that. But what do you see now? You see everybody wearing Wade jerseys. Who are the Hall of Famers who came into town during the Arison's run? You've had Shaq, you've had LeBron, you've had Bosh, you've had Hardaway, you've had Mourning, you've had Dwayne, you've had GP, you've had Ray Allen. Okay, I'm not saying all of them were in their prime when they came, okay? But you're talking about like player in the Hall of Fame, and they have Heat tied to them. How many guys have Dolphins tied to them over the past 20 years? I can't even remember the players that played for the Dolphins between JT and Zach's retirement and recently. So anyway, I'll let you close with this, but I think there's a lot of recency bias about this. And I know you wanted to touch on this. Like the idea is, okay, well, they don't spend enough. They've been top 10 in salary over the past, I mean, in terms of, right? I mean, so it's not like they haven't spent crazy like Golden State has or Phoenix has, but they've spent.
Well, and I think so. Before I get to where they've spent, because that's unfortunately, and that's kind of where I was gonna take this, is that one, I want to just backtrack a moment and say that, and I think you've talked to Spo several times where he said things to the, and I'm paraphrasing here, but something to the effect of, if I was anywhere else, there would have been many times where I would have been fired. And he acknowledges that, just that because it's a tough business. Well, that Spo is like basically, I think he's considered among the league as like one of the absolute top basketball minds that exists, right? Like as a coach, he's at the top of the entire league. And they stuck with him. And that all ties back to the way that Mickey has stuck with Pat. Pat lost to the Knicks, a lower seeded New York Knicks, on his home floor 3 years in a row, and they stuck with him. And those are the types of things that you just see how this is built. And now Spoelstra's in place. And we talk about how, like, when Yakachonis was interviewed, and he lit up more about Spoelstra than he did Riley. And, you know, people identify with Spo, but Mickey gets the credit for Spo as well. So I just think that the fact that the fans and some of the reaction has to do with like the Heat's recent decisions or where they spent, and on luxury tax spending, let's just we will report the facts via Spotrac. They're 15th all time in luxury tax payments. They've spent 72.3 million. Denver is just ahead of them at 79 million. And I won't go through all the teams. All the recent champions, aside from Toronto, have had to outspend Miami to get to their championships. But then there's been real busts. Like the Clippers have paid 400 million in luxury tax and have nothing to show for it. So
And that's
I
just
don't
what we know about, Greg. That's not
true.
for tree planting either.
And so, like, I don't like the idea, and it's just unfortunate that instead of Heat fans having a little bit of perspective and, like, for one moment not needing instant gratification to look at what's happened throughout these years and not just point to how much the team is spending, or if they think that maybe that ownership hurt some of these trades or anything like that, even though I don't believe that to be how this played out at all. I just want to remind everybody that the Heat have spent, and they've always been willing to spend when they have a contending team. So
I think the question is that fans who think the Heat have become risk averse are equating that with spending, and it's not the same thing. Yes, they're tied in some ways, because if you take big risks and you have to pay those big risks and it blows up, you have blown up your salary structure, you've blown up over the aprons, you have fewer vehicles to fix it. So I understand why it's tied together, but they have not. I think it gets, again, conflated with this idea that, well, they haven't gotten involved for some of these players because they don't want to spend. No, if the compensation in terms of players for Kevin Durant at this stage of his career had been a place where they could get to, which they couldn't because Wiggins and Rozier's contracts were not interesting to Phoenix. So it was kind of a dead conversation at that point. Okay. Even Jovic. Here's the other thing. Okay. It got out there, right, that they wouldn't give up Jovic or whatever. And that's why they would just Jovic. They wouldn't give up just Jovic. And that's why they couldn't get Durant. When
ridiculous.
literally Jovic has said, okay, well, yeah, my agent told me that the rumors weren't just for the media. They were real. Like there was a possibility of me getting traded. But again, it's not that it was just Jovic. It's that to get the contracts to work for Durant, they would have had to give up all of these contracts to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no nuance to this. I am not saying, to close here, before people say that I'm carrying Coca-Cola or water or whatever, I'm not saying that I agree with everything that's happened over the past few years. Obviously, the Terry Rozier decision was a disaster, okay? And although we were wrong about it too, we're not paid to make the decision, okay? So we get off the hook for that one. We just effed up in terms of talent evaluation and what it was. They effed up in terms of how it ended up playing out. Okay, no question about that. And that set them back in the first round pick. And now, you can't, and now is the FBI investigation. You can't move him and all the rest of the things. Now you just got to let it play out. All of that. Okay, I get it. That's on them. Okay. Other decisions that they made, we can argue with. Whether they should have gotten ahead of things and maybe trade a guy for a second round pick if they could have. I know they'll argue with that, all of that. But if you're going to look at the totality of this, okay, and say, all right, which of the organizations over the past 30 years have you basically, believed could fix something? This would be the one. All the same people are in place. The argument to that is going to be, okay, it's passed them by, as if the league doesn't go to Andy to consult with him on the CBA and the salary cap, as if every team in the league wouldn't try to hire Adam Simon, as if Eric Spoelstra didn't just get named the third best coach of this century since the year 2000, okay, by CBSSports.com, and wins that executive survey every single year, and as if most people in the NBA wouldn't want to work for the current ownership. I mean, you have to really make a leap, okay, to say everything sucks. I'm not saying it's perfect. They need to get back on course. This needs to be a buzz place again. It's not. This season, I think they're going to be better than people expect. Okay, and I am interested in some things. I like the development of young players. Clearly, Larson and Jovic have looked great. Powell, I think, adds something. They have good players in Bam and Tyler. I think they could squeak into a 6th spot, maybe. Okay, but that's not the Heat during the Arison Riley tenure. It's not the
And
Heat.
that's a
Okay?
testament to them.
That's exactly, and that's and if you can say that, then yeah, the man probably deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. That's where I'm at with it, and I
No
think if
question.
you don't see it that right, I just don't think there's any question. All right, anyway, we'll close it there, and then tomorrow we'll get back to criticizing him and everybody else involved with the organization. Greg, appreciate it. Ziotics, use the code on the floor. PrizePicks, use the code FIVE. FIVE.
Thank you for listening to the Five on the Floor on the Five Reasons Sports Network. After all, someone needs to listen to my dad.